friends, welcome to the next episode of DotVVM Minutes. Recently I have found an interesting and very long thread on GitHub of ASP.NET Core, and there was a question about support of web forms in .NET Core. The thread is really long, there's a lot of comments, and unfortunately it starts with an answer from David Fowler that there are no plans to port web forms on ASP.NET Core. And I have posted a comment about using .VVM as one of the migration paths for web forms developers, and it got quite a lot of positive reactions. However, the process of migrating the web forms app using .VVM is not very straightforward, so I have decided to dedicate this episode of .VVM Minutes for web forms developers, and I will show how to take a web forms application and migrate it to .NET Core with using .VVM. Let me start with a short disclaimer. Web forms may be not the only thing that prevents you from going to .NET Core, so you should carefully review your web forms application in order to see if you are not using WCF or other things that may not work in .NET Core. However, Entity Framework 6 should work with .NET Core 3.0, so if you are using that, you should be okay. So if web forms is the only thing that prevents you from going to .NET Core, then this migration scenario can be interesting to you. I have seen a lot of projects, large projects written in web forms, and it's practically impossible to rewrite them from scratch because it's a tremendous amount of work. If you have been building a web application for 15 years, you cannot reasonably rewrite it with all the features in less than half of the time. You would need an additional team to do that work because the old application still needs to be maintained, and also the transfer of the knowledge from one team to another, it's also a lot of communication, a lot of overhead that will add. This way of migration allows you to just run .VVM and web forms side by side. So you install .VVM in the web forms application, and you can start adding new pages or rewriting the web forms pages in .VVM, but it's still the same project. You have all the integration, all the things you would expect, like a single sign-on, so when the user signs in the web forms part, this user will be visible in the .VVM part and vice versa. And after you rewrite all the pages from web forms to .VVM, you can just push your project to .NET Core because .VVM syntax is the same on .NET Framework and .NET Core. I have a nice and simple web forms application. There's a master page and 3 pages. Basically, it's file, new project, ASP.NET Web Forms, and it's the default template. However, I have added a sample of using grid view because it's one of the most popular and frequently used controls in web forms, and of course I expect that all web forms applications are using grid view, so I will show how to migrate web forms grid view in .VVM. Okay, when I run this application, it's just the first page with the grid view and 2 just static pages, nothing really complicated here. So this is a very simple example. However, the principle is the same no matter how large your application is. This is clean web forms, nothing really special here. These are the default packages that comes with the default project template. So the first step you need to do is to install .VVM NuGet package in this project. So I will do that, and I will just use .VVM. And there are two branches. The first is .VVM. This is the core framework. This is the dependency. However, what you are looking for is .VVM Owin, because it contains the hosting infrastructure for Owin, for classic ASP.NET stack. So this will help us integrate with web forms. If you would be using ASP.NET Core, and we will do it at the end of this video, we will switch this package in to this package. So we will use .VVM ASP.NET Core instead. However, now we need .VVM.Owin. Okay, So I will install it. And this package requires Owen, and which is basically it's a technology that were here before ASP.NET Core, and it was thought for a while as a future of ASP.NET. However, then it was started from scratch, and ASP.NET Core was created. But many principles you can see in ASP.NET Core, like the request pipeline and things like that, these were very similar in Owen. Owen was taken as an inspiration for that. Okay, so I'm installing the .vvm.owen package. And to be able to use Owen in ASP.NET Web Forms applications, we also need Owen host system web. So this will allow us to run Owen technologies within the ASP.NET Web Forms stack. So what this package actually does is that it creates the Owen pipeline and put it in front of the web forms. So we will have the startup file here. I will add it very soon. And the Owen pipeline will run, and if there's no middleware that could handle the request, it will be passed to the web forms. So this is our extensibility point where we can just catch some HTTP requests and handle them from .vvm. And if the page is not rewritten in the .vvm, it will fall back to the web forms part. Okay. So we have the two packages installed. There's a lot of dependencies, especially for the Owen and for .vvm.owen. So these are the dependent packages, but it shouldn't do any problems in your web application. And most probably you already have them, because any library that targets .NET Standard will install these packages. And now I need to add the Owen startup file. Okay, so new item, and I need to add Owen startup class, and I will name it just startup. And this is the place where I configure the Owen stuff. So I have to register all Owen middlewares. In this case, it will be the .vvm middleware, which supports Owen. And if .vvm cannot handle this request, it will be passed to the original web forms. So we can say app use.vvm, and .vvm needs the .vvm startup class. This will register our startup class. Oh, I'm missing something. Okay, application root. So I will hosting environment.application physical path. .vvm needs to know what is the root directory of the application. Where is it running? Okay, and this class should implement i.vvm startup and also i.vvm services configurator. So we have two interface methods, and it's not required, but there's a convention which says that we have three methods here. So we have configure routes. There is the configure controls, and there is a configure configure resources. But you can keep everything in one method. It's just up to you. I just like to separate these things because they are a little disconnected from each other. Okay. Okay, so this is my .vvm startup. That's how the .vvm startup class looks in most .vvm applications. And we have just registered this pipeline. What we can do now is to try that the integration works. And we can do it in a few ways. So I will just create a page which can be called about. That will be our first page we will migrate. But .vvm has a convention also. It's a convention, so you don't need to follow that. But in .vvm, we typically have the views and view models folders. So I will create a views and view models folder. Okay. And so I will create our first view. So let's just create a master page. So we can call create a .vvm master page. I will name it site, and we won't put anything in it for now. And also I will create the about page and embed it in our master page, so it will be here. And now I need to just register my route. So I will place hello from .vvm in the about page, and let's register it in the .vvm startup. So config routes, route table, add, and we will add our about page. The URL is URL is /about.vvm, and the virtual path is views/about.html. So if I will put this in the URL, .vvm should load and display this page. So let's try it. So I will refresh my application and /about.vvm and hello from .vvm. So we have .vvm running in our app, but I can use the web forms app as I did previously. So this is running side by side. So this is the about route. What happens if I just use this URL in our route registration? Because now two pages are registered to the same route. But as I said, the OWIN is put in front of the web forms. So if .vvm can catch this request, I can refresh it now. If .vvm can catch this request, it won't be passed to the web forms. Okay, so we have our .vvm version of about. Yeah. So if .vvm can handle the request, it will handle it. If not, it will pass the request to the web forms. Now we need to make the master page look the same in the same way as the web forms. So the users won't notice that they are using two pages in different technologies. So I can just take the master page and copy the entire structure of the file in our .vvm master page. Okay, so let's do it. There is a lot of differences in the syntax of .vvm and web forms. We have created a nice page called .vvm.com/webforms, and this page describes all the differences. So we don't have these directives. We have the view model directive. We don't have run at server, and the controls typically don't need their IDs. There is no view state. Instead of that, we have the view models, etc., etc. So you can go through this page. It compares the differences in the syntax. However, the names of the controls, text box, they are the same. The grid view, checkbox, everything you were using in web forms, you can use in .vvm. But the names of the controls, the properties are the same. How you use it, it's quite different. Yeah, we also have repeater and things like that. Okay, so what I can see here is the binding syntax, which is a little bit different. So in web forms, we were using this to print out the page title. However, in .vvm, the syntax looks like this. So I can use resource. This value will be just rendered in the page. It won't be changed while the page is already displayed to the user. So I can use the resource binding. I don't need to use the value binding, which is for the dynamic stuff in the page. So this is the title. And also here at the bottom, we have the date, time, now, year. So that's the same situation. I can just print out the year. So system, date, time, now, year. Okay, so that's it. Then I can look for all the run at server, because these must go away. So I can just replace them with nothing. And I will add a space here so it will be cleaned up. Okay. And also in web forms, the entire page needed to be enclosed in the form element. We don't need anything like that in .vvm. Okay. So let's get rid of the form element. Now we have the squiggles here in the content placeholder. The only difference is the prefix. In .vvm we are using dot content placeholder, but the content placeholder and content, these controls are same, so you just need to fix the prefix. And the only difference which remains here is the script manager. We don't have script manager in .vvm. We treat the resources in a little bit different way. So let's register these resources. I can see they are using jQuery here and they are using Bootstrap. So I can go to configure resources and we can register our resources. So we will need the jQuery. So config resources at register, sorry. Okay, and it's called jQuery and it will be a script resource. And now we need to place the location as the URL resource location. So the browser will just use some URL to get the resource. And let's go back. So the URL is this one. So let's use it. Okay, so if anybody needs jQuery, it can be found here. Let's do the same thing with the Bootstrap. So I can use the Bootstrap resource, and this is our Bootstrap. So this is the JavaScript part of the Bootstrap. Bootstrap also has CSS. So I will also register a third resource called Bootstrap-CSS. It won't be script resource, it will be style sheet resource. And the location for that will be content bootstrap min CSS. So this is the location. And .vvm resources can specify the dependencies. It would be nice if somebody needs Bootstrap, he can say I need Bootstrap, and the CSS could be included automatically. So we can say this depends on Bootstrap CSS. And also, if you use Bootstrap, you need jQuery to be loaded first. So this script also depends on jQuery. Yeah. So you can list dependencies in your resource registrations. And then there's the last thing, content site CSS, which are CSS styles which are added on top of the Bootstrap. So we can create a last resource called site. And it will be a style sheet resource, so I will just borrow this. It can be site, and that's this. And it needs Bootstrap. And if I request Bootstrap, all the other resources will be added here. So it will be very easy, because I can say just the site needs Bootstrap, and that's it. Now I need to indicate that I need the site resource on my page, so I will just delete the script manager, and I can delete this style registrations, and I can use the control which is called .required resource, and I say that on this page we will need the resource called site. I haven't run the application, so the IntelliSense is not refreshed, but if I would run the application, the IntelliSense could load the names of the resources, so this would be in the IntelliSense. Okay, and the last thing I need to do is to create the title property in our view model, because everything you are binding to you have to have in your view model. So I have just done that. So I used control dot to automatically generate this for me. So I can use a public string title, and because I need the title on all the pages, I can make this property abstract. So every page will need to specify its title. The view model of the master page could also be abstract. So all the view models of all content pages, including the about view model, they will have to implement this abstract property, which is nice because I can make sure by a compiler that every page will specify its title, which is good for search engines. Okay, so this will be about. Okay, now I can just run my application. So I will reload that. Okay, and when I click about, you can see that it's almost unnoticeable. The menu and everything looks the same. There are the same styles and everything, just the page content is different. Okay, so let's migrate the about page. So let's finish the migration. Okay, so this is the about.html. This is the about ASPX. So that will be very easy. Here's the binding syntax, so I can just use the resource binding for the title property. Okay, so it's very easy. If you just change the markup and you don't touch the C# part, you don't need to recompile the application. It's also similar to web forms where it worked the same way. So now this is in .vvm. We can make sure that it's really .vvm by looking in the page source. You can see there is the .vvm resource, knockout.js and things like that. The stuff comes from the .vvm. There is no view state because we are not in the web forms anymore. But it looks exactly the same like the web forms version of the page. So it's very seamless. The user cannot notice anything. Okay, let's do the same thing for the contact page. And it will be also quite trivial. So I will create a new page, embed it in my master page. It's here, it has its own view model. I need to implement the abstract class. So this title will be contact. And again, I will take this page and copy the contents to here and do that. Okay, also there is the data binding for the title. Nothing really special here. I can just copy from here. So that's it. And now I'm here. Okay, so let's rebuild this. And also the contact page will be done in .vvm. And okay, it's now working. So these two are now in .vvm. This is still in web forms. We can also delete these two web forms files because we won't need them anymore. So we have only default SPX and those are already migrated. So let's do the last page, the default SPX. Okay, I can copy all the content. This is very easy because there is nothing web forms related. And now the grid view. This will be the most difficult part, but fortunately the .vvm has a similar grid view control like we have in web forms. And it also supports paging and sorting like this one. So I hope that this migration won't take so long. Okay, so let's create a grid view. And every grid view needs a data source. So we have to bind a data source to this control. So I will say it will be customers, for example, and that's it. And we can use the same CSS class, so the table will really look the same. In .vvm, there is no CSS class property there, but you can use just the class attribute from HTML. So it will be, it's easier because this just renders a plain HTML table. So you can just attach any HTML attribute to that. Okay, so let's specify our columns. So we have the grid view text column, which is identical to the bound field. And we can use the value binding. And I won't have IntelliSense here because the customers is not defined in the view model. But I know the name is ID. Header text will be ID. And sort expression will be also ID. I don't need to specify it if it's the same as the value binding. However, I need to say that allow sorting should be true. And by the way, I don't even have to say equals true. I can just keep it like this. Maybe to have an IntelliSense for the next columns, I can define the grid view dataset right now. So let's do this. Okay, the grid view data can be bound to just a list, or if you want to use paging and sorting, you need to use grid view dataset. Grid view dataset of customer, which comes from our model namespace. And this dataset, I will just initialize that to a new object. And there are a couple of things. The first is the paging settings. And in the web forms version, we had a paging for the page size was 10. And there was also the sorting enabled. So we will have to use the paging options and sorting options. Paging options has the size property, so I can say page size is 10. And for sorting options, I can specify the default sort column. So the sort expression is, and this is just string, the name of the column. However, I can use the name of customer.id. So if I rename this, this would be updated automatically. And sort descending equals to false. So I don't need to set up at all, but let's put it here just for clarity. Okay. Also, the default view model should implement the title, so it's home page. And now the IntelliSense should start working, because now this control already knows this the types. Yeah. So let's do the first name and last name. First name and last name. And again, we have our IntelliSense here. Okay, so that's it. In web forms, the pager was displayed right inside the grid view. There was a last table row which contained the links to all pages. In DotVVM, the control for paging is separated from the grid view, so we also need to use .dataPager. Dataset equals value customers. Okay. And last thing is to load data in our collection. In web forms, there was a function called migrate _ get data. So if I could go here and look here, we have a static method called get customers, which give us an iQueryable of the customers. And then there is a migrate my data, which gets the sort by expression, number of rows, start row index, and it returns total row count. Yeah, so all these things. And so I just took the iQueryable, calculated the number of results, and then applied the sorting and paging and return the iQueryable. So in .vvm the process is a little bit different, but if you have iQueryable, you can do it in a very similar way. So I can just copy this method and place it in my view model. In a real world, this would be in your business layer. It shouldn't be in your view model, but in order to keep this example simple, I just put it here. And to load the data, it's the best place for loading the data is the pre-render method. It returns the task, and it should be public. And I can say customers load from queryable and put the queryable here. And all the paging and sorting magic will be done automatically. So I just take the customers and queryable, pass it to the dataset, and that's it. Yeah. So this is very easy. And I need to return base pre-render because this is async, which is also a very nice advantage over web forms, that now you can fully leverage the async stuff. It was possible in web forms using some ways, but not everywhere. in DotVVM the async is supported on all the places you may need. So that's also a nice thing. Okay, so customers load from queryable, and I put the iQueryable to the dataset, and it will use the paging and sorting options to load anything. If the user switches the pages, it will be represented in here in the page index, so the grid view dataset will know which records should be displayed. If you are not using Entity Framework or any other library which produces the iQueryable, you can load the dataset using just the items collection. So you can see the customer's dataset. It has the items, which is just a list. So you can load your data into this items, and you can say paging options total row count. Yeah, so you can assign the total number of rows, so the pager will know how many pages it should generate. And you can also read the page index and page size and sort expression. So this is the place from where you can get the sorting and paging parameters. So let's finish this page. And we need to register our route for the default page. So let's do that. Default page has empty URL path, and this is default.html. So I can compile and reload, and now the page should look the same, but it will be in .vvm. Okay, so we are using the same CSS, so this is very easy. You can notice that the pager looks differently because I forgot to add a CSS class to that. So I can use the CSS class equals pagination, which is supported by Bootstrap. So now the pager looks quite nicely. It nicely fits the Bootstrap styles. And you can see the sorting just works, and also the paging works. Yeah. And the page is not reloaded. The entire page is not reloaded. This is not doing a full HTTP post. This is done by Ajax because, of course, .vvm just sends the JSONs to the server and back. And you can believe me that there's no web forms, because when I remove the default SPX page, the application still works, and you can see everything is the same as it was at the beginning. This is how you can do a migration, and now I don't have any web forms related stuff in my application. I have also removed the global ASAX, so which contained the initialization of web forms stuff, so because it's not needed anymore. And also I can remove the master page from web forms, so it's also not needed. So now my project doesn't contain anything that would be related to web forms, and the application still works. And it also worked at every moment during the migration process. So even if your application has 200 files, 200 pages to be migrated, they can run side by side, so you can do the continuous modernization of the app. The final step is to port this application to ASP.NET Core and to .NET Core, because right now we are using .NET Framework 4.7. I will create a new project, which will be the ASP.NET Core web application, and I will name it new web app. And I will make it empty, and we will be running an ASP.NET Core 2.2, which is the latest stable release of .NET Core so far. So this is the new app, and there is a lot of things that will be very same. I can just take all those view models and views and just copy them in the new application. Here is the content files with the CSS, the fonts, and scripts. So I can take these folders and copy them, but not to the root, but in the www root, which is not here, but I will create it. So here is the root of the static content. So I can take this, and this folder and copy them here. And the last thing is I will need my model, because it contains just the customer class, but it will still be required. I can move my .vvm startup. So that's it. And I need to install my NuGet packages. I also need to handle the startup. So I can copy this and place it to the startup in the new project. However, the startup is a little bit different in ASP.NET Core. First, you need to configure the services. So this is the first thing, and then I can just run my .vvm stuff. Okay, however, right now I will need to install the NuGet packages. So instead of .vvm.owin, this time I will install .vvm ASP.NET Core. But the syntax of the views and view models is exactly the same. So this will just use the ASP.vvm ASP.NET Core. Okay, so go ahead. Okay. Now all the references are found, so it should work. Here I will import the .vvm startup. There's a little mess because the namespace didn't change, so I'm in this new web app, but all the copied files are using the old namespace, so I will have to fix it. And now we have app environment application, the content root path, which is the equivalent of hosting environment application physical path. Okay, and in the services we should add .vvm and also use the .vvm startup configuration, so .vvm can initialize and prepare everything for the .vvm itself. Okay, and before I run it, I have to fix all the issues with my namespaces. So I will use Ctrl-Shift-H, replace in files in the current project, and I will replace old web app with new web app. And I hope that it will replace everything that should be replaced. Okay, let's try to build the project. Okay, so succeeded. So hopefully when I run this, okay, so it seems like the application is working, but there is a problem in the CSS, and the thing we were missing is the registration of static files, because by default in ASP.NET Core there's no static files, so use static files, and I have to use static file options, and I hope that I need to say file provider equals new physical file provider, and the root for the web servable content will be environment.web root path, which is the path to the www root folder. Okay, so let's run this. So after I refresh that, I should have all the CSS back. Okay, so now the same application runs ASP.NET Core. It works. Everything is the same as in the old web forms app. Okay, so hopefully I've shown how the migration can work. It's still quite a lot of work, but it's better than rewriting the entire application. It's important to note that the syntax of .vvm and web forms is different, but here's the cheat sheet, .vvm.com/webforms, so please refer to that. And if you have any questions or any feedback, please tell us on our GitHub, github.com/riganti/.vvm, or at our Gitter chat, or any other way. our social media, anything. We'll be really happy to hear about your experience with integrating of .vvm with web forms. Still, web forms will be supported because .NET Framework is not going anywhere. It will be here for next 10, 15, maybe 20 years, so you don't need to hurry. However, .vvm can help you to continuously migrate the application so you can still deliver new features, still fix the bugs in the web forms part, and in a few months or maybe years, you will be able to replace all the web forms pages with .vvm pages and go to .NET Core. Because as you can see, this project runs .NET Core 2.2. Okay, thank you very much, and tell us about your experience with migrating the web apps in web forms. See you next time.